is the Aqua Sensory Podcast. I'm your host, Jo Wilson. In this show, you will learn all about sensory harmony in water for babies and the early years. Because when we grow to love, connect, and respect water, learning follows naturally. So today we are talking one of my favourite subjects, all about the senses. And I have the perfect expert for you to meet. Welcome, Meg Faure.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited about this.
So, shall we start? Because it's such a broad subject, isn't it? And we're focusing on babies and the early years, but the senses are so important. So let's share from a developmental point of view and obviously connect it to the pool, because I think sometimes we miss out the water part and why the sensory systems are so important for us to understand.
Yeah, so we have more sensory receptors on our body and neurons going through to our brain than we do motor, which are our output neurons. So when we look at the brain, we know that there's a lot of importance that's actually placed on what goes in as opposed to what comes out. Now, of course, as parents and as clinicians, we're all very interested in what comes out because that's what we can see. So how well can the baby walk, talk, crawl, swim? But actually what goes in is really where the importance sits. So our sensory systems are massively important. We also don't always know that we have not just 5 sensory systems or 5 senses, but we actually have 8 senses. And those additional 3 hidden senses, we like to call them, are the sense of proprioception, interoception, and vestibular. So our vestibular sense sits inside of the inner ear. And actually, when our babies are in utero, and of course they're surrounded by water, and then this wonderfully kind of almost gravity-free environment, they are able to turn upside down and turn around. And just before birth, they actually go upside down in the water. And that really stimulates that sense, that vestibular sense. So that vestibular sense is very important. And that vestibular sense actually has direct neural feedback into the vestibular spinal tract, which is a nerve that goes from the brain down the spinal cord and gives signals to the muscles to build up our muscle tone. So that's why the more movement we get, the more vestibular stimulation we give our little ones, the better their muscle tone and motor coordination will be. So it's a very important hidden sense. The second hidden sense I mentioned was the sense of interoception, maybe not as pertinent to baby swimming, but that's the messages we get from our internal organs. So is my tummy full? Have I got colic? Is my heart beating fast? All of those type of things. Do I need to go to the toilet? And then the third hidden sense that I mentioned is a sense of proprioception, and that's massively stimulated by swimming. And proprioception, I think, is our most important sense. It's a sense that comes from our muscles and joints, and it is most stimulated by pressure and by traction and compression. And so when we're trying to move against resistance, as an example, we're getting wonderful proprioceptive input. And that's one of the reasons why when we go and swim, we are using all those we're stimulating all those proprioceptors because we are moving ourselves against the resistance of water. So the sense of proprioception and the vestibular sense, which are these critically important hidden senses, are both very well targeted when we're swimming with our little ones.
Wow. So your background, obviously with occupational therapy, but you were bringing in so much, obviously, neurological science. So obviously that is so valuable for parents to know. And do you want to give us a bit of a shout out of your books? Because I know that you have so many and it's nice for everybody to know about your background as well.
Yes. So I am an occupational therapist, but I do think my obsession has been with the neuroscience of development. And there was a wonderful book that I read many years ago by a neuroscientist called Lisa Elliott, and her book was What's Going On in There. And it was all about what happens inside the brain as little ones are developing. And moms, if you want to go and read that book, it's just fascinating. She wrote it while she was having her own children and kind of documented how the brain developed. So yes, I have an obsession with brain development. I also think that the sensory systems and brain development can answer almost every question we have about parenting. So I have become a specialist in everything from potty training through to sleep problems, through to emotional regulation, through to speech, through to developmental delay. And the only reason why I can have such a diverse focus across so many disciplines is because there's one thread in them, and that's our sensory systems. So I am really, really fascinated by the sensory systems. So that fascination started when I first was qualified. I lived in America. I qualified as a sensory integration therapist, and then later on a neurodevelopmental therapist. And that kind of was the basis of my clinical practice. And I ran my clinical practice all the way through till 2020 when we moved to the UK. And alongside that, I've had this real interest in conveying scientific information through to parents, because parents have the same questions and they just wanted all the science debunked. And so I started to write books. And my first book, Baby Sense, became an instant bestseller. It still is a bestseller. And subsequent to that, wrote Pregnancy Sense, Feeding Sense, Sleep Sense, Your Sensory Baby, and then recently Allergy Sense and Weaning Sense. And Weaning Sense is also a bestseller. So that looks at how you use the sensory systems to wean babies. So I've kind of had this long history of conveying sensible information to parents. And then more recently have developed a parenting application. So if parents want to know more, they can pop onto the parenting app, which is called Parent Sense. It's available on both of the app stores, the iOS store and on the Android store. And that's kind of where you'd get to know more about what I'm going to talk about today.
Oh, that's great. And as you say, it's bringing through quite complicated science information to everyday parent talk, because there's just so much information out there. And I love the way that you were talking about regulation as well, because that really impacts our well-being, and doesn't it, and our behavior. And we see sometimes quite big emotions in the pool. Obviously babies, should we start with our baby sensory systems, why perhaps we are seeing babies? Should we sort of talk about why maybe their sort of thresholds can sometimes, I almost say to parents, because they say, oh, what have I done, what's wrong? And I'm like, oh no, nothing. They have such a sensory threshold that can just flip really from being quite calm to then suddenly boop, they're alert. It tips them over.
Well, it's amazing, Joe, that you've got all of those insights. It's such a benefit for the moms who come to you, because sensory thresholds are things that a lot of people don't know about. So we all have sensory thresholds. We have our own unique sensory thresholds, and we also have sensory thresholds based on stressful situations. So let's start with our own sensory thresholds and what sensory thresholds are in general. So a sensory threshold, like a pain threshold, when it is a very low threshold, it means that we overreact to everything in the environment. In other words, any sensory information that comes in can feel like it's coming in very high volumes, and it means that we can feel increased pain, maybe noises sound too loud, maybe even the little label on the back of our shirt is scratchy, because our threshold for touch, as an example, is really, really low. So if we've got a low threshold, we over-respond to sensory information. If we've got a very high threshold, and some of us do, then we under-respond to sensory information. In other words, a whole lot of stuff can be going on in the pool or in the environment, and we don't even notice it. And we tend to have those children being quite laid back, or they can also be what are called sensory seekers. So they actually know that there's something more interesting going on than what they're actually perceiving. And so they start to seek a lot more sensory information. Now, I have kind of made this accessible for moms because I talk about the 4 sensory personalities. So our low threshold children who are more sensitive fall into 2 buckets. They are either sensitive babies or they are slow to warm up babies. And slow to warm up babies are sensitive initially, but once something is proven to be not too dangerous for them or not too threatening, they then warm up and they can actually look like a social butterfly. So that'll be your baby who screams the first 2 sessions or screams as they get into the water, but then you can't get them out at the end of it because they have just got used to it. They're happy there. They're having so much fun, and now they don't want to get out. So slow to warm up children tend to really battle with transitions, and sensitive babies, it's not just battling with the transition. They battle with everything, and they will scream the whole way through, and eventually mom just takes them out the pool and never comes back, for more lessons because it's too distressing for the mom and the baby. So those very, very low thresholds those are sensory personalities that fall into the sensitive and slow to warm up. Then on the high threshold side of the continuum, the 2 sensory personalities there are the settled baby, who is super laid back, sleeps through early, eats early. When they get to the pool, they absolutely love it. I mean, doesn't matter to them if they're in or out. They transition in, they transition out, and they just tend to be really happy swimmers. And then your social butterfly, oh my gosh. And I had one of them, my firstborn, and he loved his swimming lessons. We started when he was 6 months old, and he didn't care if he was going underwater, above water, what he was doing. He just loved it because he was seeking the stimulation. So these 4 sensory personalities will mean that babies respond differently to swimming.
That's so nice. And I think it allows us to have an understanding and sort of an observation note, really. And just to think, well, what does my little one, how are they today? And can I meet them? And as you say, just having that awareness, and rather than sort of putting it on ourselves and think, oh, we're doing
There's
this
something
wrong,
wrong
we're
with
doing
us.
that wrong,
Exactly. And if moms are interested in knowing what their baby's sensory personality is, inside the Parent Sense app, we actually have a course that you can do. It's in the app. You go to the courses section and you can actually find out what your baby's sensory personality is, and then what you should do to actually help them. And one of the things that we do is we give you a little booklet in that course that includes strategies for stimulation, and actually swimming comes into that. So it is well worth them doing that.
Oh, no, I'd love to know more about that. That's great. Because I think sometimes in the pool, we can put sometimes too much in, and it can be just too much for little ones. And to have a more graded response, to start with just the water and see if how little ones are settling in, and then to start adding in. And then at Aquasense, we have a layer so we can add in and we can take away. So we're really seeing what our little ones need that day and that week.
And I think that's wonderful. So I mean, the most important step there is for the mum to understand her baby's sensory personality, and to understand. So, for instance, let's say she's got a sensitive baby or slow to warm up baby. Try and see if she can get herself into a smaller class rather than a bigger class. Because the number of children could be too chaotic, or the noise, or so you can start to tailor the activities towards the personality. The second thing is, and I haven't mentioned this, but there are certain things in life that can impact our thresholds and give us all a lower threshold and make us all more sensitive. And those things are generally pain, illness, stress, and tiredness. And so moms can understand that if their little one is sick and miserable, they're not going to do well in a session. If they are hungry, they're not going to do well in a session because their threshold will be lower. And most importantly, if they're tired, they're not going to do well because their threshold will be lower. So when moms are scheduling their swimming lessons, they should also be thinking about that. Like a 9-month-old typically sleeps at around 9 in the morning and about 12 in the afternoon. So don't schedule your lesson exactly at that time. Schedule it after they've woken up, because they're much more likely to learn to swim, enjoy the swimming, and have a wonderful experience.
Yeah, and I was thinking when you were talking about thresholds, how the senses can react to them. So I was thinking and almost like thinking about myself as well, that when I'm tired, just as you say, I like nothing better than to be a little bit quieter, to maybe be sometimes sort of left alone. I'm a little bit fussy, but then actually when I'm feeling pain, I absolutely seek touch and I want that deep hug. And I think that's what we see in the pool as well.
Absolutely. And that, that particular sense when you're seeking out that hug is the sense of proprioception, which I've already mentioned.
Yeah.
And it is our most regulating sense. And that is why, so how many of us get into a bath after a long day of putting kids down? We get into a bath, warm water, and we just feel the whole day lifting off us.
Yeah.
So yes, water, warmth, comfort, touch, it's all wonderful ways to access that proprioceptive sense.
Yeah. So why is our senses are linked so much to our emotions and so much to our regulation, and just how we can, with a little bit more understanding, to support our parents and our babies and young children?
Yeah, so our senses actually provide the platform, and I have quite an interesting diagram of it, like a little triangle that each layer builds on itself. And one of the real basal layers is this sensory sense, the sensory system. So if our sensory system is overstimulated, it becomes almost a little bit fractured, and it means that the next level that needs to build on top of that, which is emotional regulation, hasn't got a good foundation. Whereas when you've got a really good foundation of sensory regulation, and you've got a higher threshold, and you're not overstimulated, then you're going to be much more emotionally self-regulated. And actually, it works in the brain. Our sensory systems are very, very deep seated in our brain, whereas our emotional system is a little bit higher up in our limbic system, which is the emotional center. And then on top of that goes our cortex, which manages behavior. And that's the next layer. So we've kind of got these three layers building: sensory regulation, emotional regulation on top of it, and then eventually behavioral regulation if we were going to, and then after that comes cognitive regulation, but we don't have to go through that. But certainly emotional regulation happens best when we have well-adjusted sensory systems. And so when we are overstimulated, any of us, we really battle to manage our emotions, and we can very quickly flip into our red brain, which means that we are not able to self-regulate our behavior. And when that happens, very small triggers can push us over the edge. And if we're pushed over the edge, we often can't come back from it. So a case in point would be if a little one had been in a very stimulating class and their threshold was already a little bit low. Maybe they came and they were a little bit tired. Mum brought them into the pool, lots of children, lots of splashing of water on their face as an example, lots of sounds of songs, and they're becoming increasingly more and more overstimulated as they're going through this 30-minute little swimming session, let's just say. And then by the end of it, they now are already overstimulated. And now mum wants to move them from the warm environment of the water into the cooler environment of the air, let's say it was. And suddenly they start to cry because they don't want to get out. And then they can't come back from it. They can't self-regulate that emotion. And suddenly there's this massive temper tantrum. Mom's trying to dress them. She just wants to get out of there as fast as possible. She's trying to get her, so get herself sorted. And so you've kind of got this absolute kind of crisis happening because the little one couldn't self-regulate.
Yeah, that I'm sure will really resonate with a lot of different people. I think the water and people love it, and then actually the changing room experience. So my top tips would be to be prepared. And what does your little one need after? Maybe they need more of a, another towel or warm or a snack, or what will actually help your child, be a little bit more regulated after, rather than just rushing into it and just, rushing home to actually, have that full experience as well.
Absolutely. And they're little things mom can do, which I'd love to share with you. So one of them is, I love the fact that you said have a warm towel. If that is a possibility, that's wonderful. I mean, moms, you can even put your towel in the tumble dryer at home, wrap it up really tightly and put it in the bottom of your bag. So when you get out the pool, you've got this nice warm, little bit of warmth in the towel. And then sit with your little one on your lap and give them some seriously deep pressure through that towel. So hold them tight against your body when you toweling them down, giving them the deep pressure, because again, you're giving them proprioception, which is calming. And then another big calming sensory technique is to actually use, I call it the M's, the mouth and the midline. Bring their hands towards the midline to hold something together, like a doo-doo blankie or a little toy, or even their water bottle or milk bottle, and then give them something in their mouth, like, for instance, a little snack or a little drink. And those things can help us to self-regulate, to help our little ones to self-regulate. So that's deep pressure through the towel, and then the mouth and the midline. And then the third thing that's a massive technique, and we use this not just for, this is something that can be used for life, and that's to teach little ones words. So to give the little one the words like, I know it's hard to get out the pool. You are loving the water. We have to get out the pool because we're going home. So, you really speak them through what's happening, because when you do that, you're giving them a tool of the mind that they can use to self-regulate.
Yeah, no, I love that. And you were just reminding me on some of the things that we do. We have this like cuddle and close. And again, we cross the arms and just bring them in. And as I say, sort of give them that really nice, and have two towels. So one on the shoulder, one around baby. So we're again giving them that little bit more comfort.
Do you do that activity as they come out the pool?
Yes, we do. And we guide parents in the pool, and as I say, the changing room as well. So like before they get changed, one of our big top tips is, to warm up our hands and to talk to baby and say, we're going swimming. Maybe to give them a beautiful, before we've sort of go to unchange them, is just to give them a really nice velvet cloak, just sort of stretch and little massage, just talking to them and just say, we're going swimming. But warming up our hands and just doing really small things acts as a little bit of obviously it's a comfort, but a nice little cue for babies, so they know that something is happening and ready. And we say to parents, that's a good one, actually,
Mm.
if you were doing nappy changing as well. So a lot of the things that parents can find out from baby swim, they can transfer, to home as well. It really helps all of the normal occupations of parents have with babies.
Absolutely. And, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I've always been such a big advocate of baby swimming classes, and I think, I mean, it holds a myriad of benefits on the sensory systems. As I said, moving against resistance gives your body proprioception. Moving through water or through air, in fact, stimulates your vestibular system. And both of those things will activate your motor systems. And your motor system will then knock on to coordination for kicking, running, playing sport, sitting up in a classroom chair, holding a pen. I know these things don't sound like they have anything to do with swimming, but the knock-on effect into the motor system is enormous in terms of gross motor skills. And then you've also got things like just interaction with mom. I mean, it's just such a massive thing. I've always said to moms, you've got to do mom and baby activities, not because you're trying to fill your week, and not even because your baby's brain needs to be stimulated. You've got to do it just because it's engagement with you, and it gives them that connection. So, baby swimming is certainly something that I prioritized with all three of my little ones.
Oh, that's lovely. And do you find from an occupational point of view that not necessarily less play in general, but maybe parents need a little bit more understanding about purposeful play, guided play? Are we seeing a rise of sensory processing disorders, or is there just more awareness around, is it linked to our modern world and perhaps, less play?
Yeah. So, I mean, first of all, on the play front, unfortunately, we are forgetting how to play as adults. And, I think there's a million reasons for that. One is that, in prior generations, certainly in the 1970s and before that, parents had to play with their little ones because there wasn't a digital babysitter. So there was nothing to do except get your little one playing or read to them. There was just no option in between.
Yeah.
There was a lot more boredom, and I love boredom. I think boredom is exceptionally important because it's when you're bored that you become mischievous and creative, and that's important for children's brains. But as parents, I mean, we don't even play with ourselves. If you think about it, at the end of a day, most of us will sit down with a series to watch, and whereas in days gone by, in years gone by, we might have gone out and played a game of tennis under floodlights, or we might have gone for a swim on the beach, or we might have played a game of mahjong or backgammon or whatever it was, And so I do think that we've forgotten how to just engage and play. And play, by definition, it has no purpose. There's no outcome, there's no point to it. It's just meaningless, fabulous, frivolous leisure. And we've just forgotten how to do that. So I think a big piece of what we have to do is relearn that. I think the wonderful thing about being in water with little ones is that it is playful, it's, and I think it's critically important. And, as to your question about whether or not we're seeing more sensory processing problems because children aren't playing, there's no doubt. There is absolutely no doubt. Screens are killing our little ones' brains. And I know moms don't want to hear that. There is a course inside the Parent Sense app on technology and tots. But the reality is that, if the more time your little one spends in front of technology, the less time they're doing other stuff. And that means that, there will be sensory deficits.
Yeah. I think generally we are aware, aren't we? And we do see, even small children with screens being given, as you say, to sort of keep them quiet if it's in restaurants or aeroplanes, whereas we just had I Spy and there wasn't the I generation, it was just really traditional games. I can remember climbing trees and rolling down hills. There was much more risky play as well. So as you say, I think everything in balance and moderation, but we are using technology, as you say, as benefit. And I think your parent sense is shows everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, it needs to be used appropriately. It needs to be used for, for certain purposes. But in terms of use for technology for children under the age of 2, it really shouldn't be used. It's not necessary. I love what you just mentioned there, the words risky play. Risky play is so important. And I think that we also a generation of helicopter parents. We try to protect our children from every possible risk. And, I think back in the day, we would have all been running around the swimming pool, on the wet tiles. And now we cosset our children and don't want them doing anything risky at all, And I think taking risks and risky behavior and letting our children kind of, maybe even fall off the step in the pool, further into the depths of the water, and then assist them slowly and gently by turning them around rather than not letting them anywhere near the water is actually important.
Yeah, as you say, it's safety where we're really guiding our little ones to know what is safe, but actually, really exploring the water. So they're really able to fully, go under and not be held all the time, and jump and bounce, and the water will always catch you. It's one of those, as you say, so playful. You splash it and it splashes you back, unlike a screen, as you say.
Absolutely. It is a wonderful, wonderful sensory experience.
Oh, it's been amazing to chat to you today. So what I'll do is I'll pop some links below, because I think, people are really going to be interested in your Parent Sense app. And as I say, there's just so many layers to it, and amazing information as well. Are you working on anything else? What have you got in store?
So it's releasing next week. So I'm presuming it'll take you a bit of time to edit this, and by then we'll have the link for you. But we've actually developed a chatbot, which is fully trained in all of my data, and it can answer any parenting and pregnancy questions. And that is being released onto WhatsApp. So we'll pop the WhatsApp number in, and you just have a WhatsApp contact. You can WhatsApp me any time of day or night. And the chatbot will then reference only my content, doesn't reference anything outside of my content, and you can ask it questions, so you know that it's safe and it's reliable. The chatbot's name is Aya. She is embedded inside the Parent Sense app, so if anybody wants to get her ahead of time, and if I haven't released it in time onto WhatsApp, go and have a look at it in the Parent Sense app. It is in there. It's free of charge in there. And then on WhatsApp, you get 12 free questions. And then after that, you pay £10 a month and have access to me at your fingertips.
Oh, wow. You heard it here first. Meg in your pocket. That's wonderful. Oh, excellent. Thank you so much. And I'm sure we'll be connecting again soon.
Definitely. Thank you for having me, Jo.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Aqua Sensory Way. It's so nice to have you here tuning in today. Let's connect again soon. I'd love you to find out more about creating sensory harmony in water. Come and join us on our socials and in our community Facebook group, Aqua Sensory Connections.